Hey everybody, it's Irene with BrainStormAcres, and as you can see, we're in the greenhouse. This morning, I'm going to plant sweet potatoes. When I say I'm going to plant sweet potatoes, I mean I'm going to plant old sweet potatoes. Now, why on earth would I do that? Well, last year, we used this pan. Now, this pan is one of those do-it-yourself conversions. Right there. It is an old roasting pan that got to the point where we just could not get it to clean anymore. And the interior stick-free stuff was coming off. We didn't like that for eating purposes. So I took a drill, and it's aluminum. I drilled a hole right there. It's about 3/4 of an inch above the bottom. And I did that so in case I got too enthusiastic when I was watering, I couldn't possibly drown the plants, because drowning your plants is never a good idea. Now, the year before, when I actually did this, I planted some specialty lettuce in there called mosh, or I think it's called mosh. It's M-A-C-H-E, and it's got a accent on it. It is a fairly common vegetable in France and other parts of Europe. It is considered to be a high-quality gourmet lettuce, and you pay good money for a salad that's basically one mosh plant. And we liked it, but it takes space. I mean, I can understand why it's expensive. It's because it takes space and you get a very limited production out of it. So we just decided that while it was a very good lettuce, and if I had unlimited space and water, I would probably grow it. Here it didn't make a lot of sense for us because we're trying to be honest, as cheap as possible, both in terms of space and water use. So, second year around, we decided, the second half of the first year that I had this, I planted spinach in it. And the problem with that was that spinach, when it gets big and bushy, uses a lot of water. This doesn't have a lot of depth to it. I could keep the plants healthy, but I had to be really on it in order to keep them from drying out. And if they dry out, then you get crummy looking spinach and all that kind of stuff. So I decided that wasn't a good plan either. And last year, we've grown sweet potatoes from our own slips 2 years in a row. And we did it the way we were always taught to do it, which is you take a sweet potato. Let me see if I have a sweet potato here somewhere. I know I do. There it is. You take a sweet potato from the grocery store and you stick a couple toothpicks on it and you support it in a container of water, and eventually it starts to sprout. And it can look kind of cool in your kitchen. And winter before last, we wound up with this monster sweet potato plant in our kitchen, which got to be a pain because I can't let the pieces lay down too far, or the cat thinks it's fun to play with them. I was terrified that somebody was going to knock this thing off the counter. We'd have broken glass all over. It was taking up too much space in the kitchen. So while it was a cool thing to start it, we don't have good windowsills in the kitchen. That's hopefully going to be fixed eventually. But for now, we don't have good windowsills. We do have a bright kitchen, so I could do it that way, but we wanted something else. Now, if you have a good windowsill location, and you're not concerned about your cat or your kids or your husband or yourself knocking stuff over, then sticking 3 toothpicks in, supporting with the butt end of the sweet potato in water, will allow your sweet potatoes to start growing and producing shoots. I did some research to find out how professional producers were creating the slips, because a lot of people buy sweet potato slips when it's time to plant their sweet potatoes. We would have to bring ours in from someplace, and I try not to get live vegetation brought in whenever I can help it, because it only takes a day or two of mishandling along the way by the postal service, the package service, somebody, and you can wind up with some pretty crummy plants to deal with. And we have done that before with bare root strawberries and stuff like that, and had pretty crummy survival rates despite totally babying them. So while the companies we deal with always guarantee their products and stuff, it's the hassle factor. So I looked up, I said, well, how do the sweet potato producers make them? Obviously they're not going to have a gigantic row of glass jars or glasses with toothpicks in them. That just does not make sense for large production. So I started reading up on sweet potatoes and how they grow and all that other kind of stuff. And they are a tropical plant. They grow wild in parts of East Asia and probably the Philippines. They were probably brought out to the various islands. And you do have to sort them out from yams because that is a different plant. The plants the ones that we grow, you can see the color. They're a red sort of a color here, and they have a very orange flesh inside. But the way we were seeing this stuff being described was that the producers would take sweet potatoes and lay them in beds of sand and just literally lay them in and cover them up and make sure they stayed watered, and they would send off these shoots. And I'm like, let's try it. So last year we had something that had started to sprout in the kitchen, and I have the same thing this year. I was scrounging around to see, because we were talking about the fact that we need to start planting sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes take a long time. I think that the general recommendation is at least 110 days. If you leave them longer than that, I would like to tell you it will always give you bigger sweet potatoes. I can't, because something goes wrong sometimes and it doesn't. But even little sweet potatoes like this are delicious. We have peeled them and cut them into slices, we call them coins or pennies, and thrown them in soups. They cook really quickly that way. These are our smallest kind of ones, and I noticed that 2 of them had sprouted. Now I haven't been through the rest of the bucket to see if I have any more. A casual view the other day said I didn't, but I will continue to look. So what I'm going to do with these is I'm going to do the same thing I did last year, which is I have this container, the soil is nice and moist in it. I'm going to lay them down flat. Now, there's a sprout there, there's a couple of sprouts here. Those sprouts are relatively fragile. I'm going to cover up this thing here and just to keep it wet. I did store this over the winter underneath the potting bench here. See, this one also has a couple of shoots here. The plant itself the tuber itself looks a little gnarly. It is a tiny bit softer than I would consider premium for eating, but I'm not looking for it to eat. I'm looking for it to produce shoots for me. So what we did last year was we simply kept these mostly covered up. We didn't worry about if something popped out during watering one day or the other. We kept this nice and damp. Remember, they're a tropical, subtropical sort of a plant. They like it moist. This is not a desert plant. When these get long and get nice big fat leaves on them, we will start chopping off sections of those leaf stems. And what you do is you make sure that you've got a leaf or 2 at the top and that you have nodes. Now, nodes are the bumps on the stems. Now, if you take off the leaves that are on those bumps, that bump spot will turn into roots on a sweet potato. So what we did was all of the sweet potatoes we grew all summer last year into the fall came from cuttings off of the plants. So when I saw that these 2 were sprouting, I was thrilled, because that's what we wanted to do again this year. And we're hoping, last year we had way more sprouts than we could possibly use. So we're hoping to be able to share with our local garden club on that one. It's pretty amazing to stick these. I mean, we just stuck them into, I would put usually 3 into one of these 10-gallon pots, in a triangle shape, and just keep them watered and fertilized. Are they susceptible to anything? What did we have trouble with? A couple of years ago, the first time we ever grew sweet potatoes, we had trouble because a bunny rabbit got in the yard and munched them really badly. We've also had trouble with ground squirrels getting in and ripping the leaves off. Chipmunks will also strip the leaves off. Those can usually be handled with traps and firearms. Or if you really were adamant about not doing that, you could build a wire cage that goes over the top of them. Our potatoes, not our sweet potatoes. Now, even though we call, potatoes and sweet potatoes are totally different plants. Sweet potatoes are morning glory family, I believe, and potatoes are nightshade. Okay? So it's a totally different plant. It's a totally different, generally speaking, collection of bugs. The potatoes will have trouble with various kinds of potato bugs and stuff like that. We have not had that problem with the sweet potatoes. We occasionally get something in there that munches some leaves. I don't remember ever having to spray last year. They were pretty tough. An advantage to growing sweet potatoes, another advantage, is that they're what we call a set it and forget it plant, and you obviously don't really forget them. But basically you plant them and then you keep them watered and fertilized. All I do for fertilizer is I watch to make sure the leaves are staying green. If they get any yellowing or something, I might give them a shot of 20-20-20, maybe a little bit of micro boost once in a while. They're just sitting there chugging along, producing roots underground. You won't really see that they're doing anything until you dump them out, and you won't really know how much they've done until you dump them out. So it's both kind of like Christmas and a disaster waiting to happen at the same time, because you won't know what you have until you have it. When you're using the previous year's leftover sweet potatoes to produce your sprouts, so your sprouts didn't cost you anything, no postage, no price from a company, and that's not putting down companies who sell these things at all. I'm just trying to keep my overhead down, so the less overhead I have, the happier I am. Now obviously, if you don't like sweet potatoes, for goodness sakes, do not grow them unless you're going to trade them with somebody and that you've got an established relationship to trade them ahead of time, because it doesn't make sense for you to grow things that you're not going to eat. That's one of the hardest things for a lot of home gardeners to learn. Oh, well, I only want to eat zucchini once a month. Then do not, and I repeat, do not grow zucchini. Do you mind eating zucchini every day of the week, 17 different ways? Then grow a zucchini. We grow a wide selection of summer squash, and we usually eat summer squash during high season of when the squash is coming off fervently, 1 to 2 times a day, 5 to 7 days a week. It doesn't bother us because we're not cooking them the same way each time. We don't cook them to slime. We keep them crispy. We use them in stir fries. They're one of the last things that go in there. They pick up the flavor of whatever kind of stir fry sauce you're using. We use them in all kinds of other stuff. So think first before you plant. But this is all it is to grow sweet potatoes. Pretty cool, really cheap. We did not do anything special the first time we tried sprouting sweet potatoes. We did not search for organic sweet potatoes. We did not do anything amazing. We took a sweet potato from the store. It was one of those things where my husband had gone shopping, I had gone shopping, and somewhere along the line the list got mixed up a little bit, and we wound up with 2 batches of sweet potatoes for Thanksgiving instead of 1. And somewhere along the line, some of the stuff didn't get eaten at Christmas, and we wound up with a sprouting sweet potato. And I said, I'll bet we can do something with that. And we did. We used the sprouts to create our own sweet potato plants. So sweet potato is one of those things that super cheap, super easy to do. Another advantage to them is you can eat the leaves. The leaves are, if you grow potatoes, you don't eat the leaves. If you grow sweet potatoes, you can eat the leaves. They can be used in stir fry. We tasted them. We thought they were okay. If you're using them in they're just another green. And we have a preference for distinctly flavored greens rather than sort of random flavored greens. So for us, it was not an awesome thing to be eating the sweet potato leaves. if you are going to harvest a lot of sweet potato leaves, it is going to stunt the production of sweet potatoes. So if you decide, for instance, that you're growing 6 buckets of sweet potatoes and you really like the flavor of sweet potato leaves, and if you just grab a leaf here or there, it's not going to harm it at all. But if you're going to harvest regularly, then I would say choose 1 bucket and always harvest your leaves from there. Maybe give it a little extra nitrogen to get it to produce more leaves, and expect that the production on that bucket is not going to be as good in terms of tubers as it will be in the other buckets. I hope you find this interesting. I hope you find it helpful. I think it's a great way for people to grow inexpensive veggies. And as I mentioned in a previous video, sweet potatoes are one of the best keepers you can have in a homestead or home environment. They last for months if you keep them even sort of cool and dry. They just, I'm very careful when I harvest to make sure that they all get laid out. I normally lay them out in the shade, dust off any dirt very gently, make sure I don't break the skins on them, let them toughen up for a day or two. I monitor them carefully to make sure nothing's chewing on them. And then they get put away, and I don't do anything fancy. I'm not wrapping individual things. I have them in the, what do they call them? They call them bussing trays. They are about that deep, they're about that wide, and about that wide. And they sell them in restaurant supply stores and places like Sam's. I think Costco may sell them too. A bunch of the big box stores sell them. They're used by tables who are bussing, by people who are bussing tables at restaurants. They are food safe, and I just literally put them in there and then put them in the shade. They have a good air circulation, and because they have such a tough skin, it's only now that we're starting to see a few of them get a little bit drier. And if I fiddled around and maybe threw a piece of cardboard or something over the top, it would reduce the water loss. So I think this is a great project for homesteaders. It's cheap. It actually would be kind of fun to do with kids if you're trying to teach them about growing veggies, because this is not brain surgery. It does take patience, and that in and of itself is a good thing to teach kids, is patience. Everything is not instant gratification. Sometimes it could take weeks for one of these things to sprout. Do it. Try it. Be sure to like and subscribe, because obviously we have lots more going on around here. And we're going to be doing a lot in the greenhouse in the next week or two. I have a bunch of planting to do. We have a bunch of cleanup to do. We have a bunch of getting rid of bugs to do. We have a few bugs in here that we do not want to carry over to the summer. And it's just also time to reorganize in terms of the locations of some of our benches and stuff, because this is a work in progress. As we have been using this greenhouse, we've been figuring out, when we first built it, this grow bench was down at the other end. We found that was kind of a pain. It was convenient in that it was really close to the door, but it was easier to heat this end than it was to heat the other end. I know, sounds crazy, but we don't have high-tech stuff here. We're trying to do it as naturally as we can, and we're trying to use as little energy as we can. So it's easier to heat down here and then even put up a plastic wall behind me somewhere. Here's Jack walking around back there. See? Say hi, Jack. Those things all were things we figured out as we used the premises here. So, yep, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. We're going to be doing tons. So until next time, bye. And be sure to keep brainstorming, because obviously we are.